Hello, this is Dr. Daryl Ray, president of recoveringfromreligion.org. If you or your loved ones are anxious about the unfolding events around the coronavirus, I hope this video will give you some practical things you can do to ensure your emotional health. We're hearing plenty about how to stay safe, wash your hands, use sanitizer, but after physical safety, there is emotional safety. And that is what I want to talk with you about today. I think it's important in times of crisis to anticipate and prepare ourselves emotionally and psychologically. Many people do not realize the common responses we all have to crisis, danger, and threat. From years of research and observation, we know that certain patterns are very common in people as they deal with things like death of a loved one, being involved in a car accident, a job change, getting divorced, and many other life experiences. In the coming months, as we as a nation will be experiencing a dramatic change in our patterns of behavior and interaction, it's very important for each of us to understand common patterns and common responses that almost any human will have to this kind of situation. So I'm going to talk to you through some of the patterns, and then we'll talk about specific responses to this particular new environment we are beginning to enter, all with the hope of making it a little bit less stressful. Imagine you are in a car accident, but you're not physically hurt, only a minor damage to your car, but hard enough to jar you. Maybe you got hit from behind when your car was standing still. You got out, you talked to the other driver, exchanged information, and went about your business the rest of the day. You reflected on the accident, but you recognized that you weren't physically hurt and all seemed normal. Perhaps a little later you started thinking about other outcomes that perhaps you could have been injured or your car damaged much more. Your brain starts making up scenarios pretty quickly after something like that happens, and your body starts responding to all those new scenarios with stress hormones. It's very common for the brain to start thinking of all the horrible things that could have happened if the accident had been worse, or if your child had been in the car, or if you'd had a concussion. It's natural for the brain to start spiraling. Not everyone does this, but many people do. Even if you don't have these thoughts, your body's adrenal response will elevate significantly after the accident. And you'll actually respond as if the accident is happening over and over again in the next few days. This keeps you and your system heightened in alertness with a stress response. For example, you might find yourself constantly looking in the rearview mirror for the next few days. That's a pretty normal response for that kind of accident. You might find yourself reliving the accident every time you get in the car. Now fast forward 24 to 48 hours, and your body is coming down off the stress response. You'll experience, or could experience, something like depression. Your body has been filled with stress hormones, and now this is a kind of rebound response. Unless you realize that you're experiencing a rebound effect, you might think something else is going on and get stressed about your response to that stress. Let's be clear, your body is responding to the stress of an accident and the distress afterwards. This will continue for 24 to 48 hours. When your body starts relaxing and coming back down, you may find yourself sleeping 12 hours and feeling unmotivated. These are normal responses to the initial shock of the accident and your body's response to your thinking process that happened after that. So what does this have to do with the coming crisis around the coronavirus? We as individuals within this culture are getting ready to go into a time that could be compared to a slow motion accident. We can see the car in front of us, and we're trying to hit the brakes, but it takes time for the car to stop. So we're sure we're going to hit the car in front of us, but we have no idea how hard it will hit. In the current environment, our emotions are ramping up, But more importantly, our thinking is ramping up and our brains start thinking of all the possibilities, problems, upset, and new patterns of behavior we may have to adopt, to say nothing about the worrying about our own health and the health of our loved ones. This is a natural response to a coming event that holds danger and unknown consequences. However, we do not have to let the environment dictate our emotional state. And that is why I'm talking to you today. We cannot control our environment. We can put in place some simple but effective emotional, psychological supports that will help us maintain stability and clear-headedness. Just knowing that we're going through a series of emotional responses to this environment can be helpful in itself. For example, if you were told after your car accident that you might have, disturbing thoughts, for a couple of days, and you might go through a day or two of depression afterwards, that knowledge might help you recognize that pattern and prevent panic and unnecessary concern. So that is what we're going to talk about today. I'm not an epidemiological expert, and I'm not pretending to be. I'm also not a medical professional, but I am a psychologist who's watched individuals and groups go through crises and challenges for decades. I also know how to read statistics and watch the patterns that we're seeing in the news, here and in other countries. My prediction is that we're moving into about a 90 to 120 day cycle that will begin with significant, even dramatic increase in the number of people infected with the virus. The trend, of course, will depend upon how effective our public health system is in educating the public and testing and treating those who may be infected. So, having this information helps us to prepare for what we're pretty sure is coming. It's like being at the seashore. If you see a wave coming at you, you can brace yourself for the crash. The wave will pass over you. You may be knocked down, but you won't be surprised. And that's our objective. Minimize the surprises. Many of us may get ill, but we're not going to be surprised or panic. We'll know that that's the wave that just hit us. And we'll be mentally and emotionally prepared to support one another and do our best to care for ourselves. The next thing we're going to recognize is that religions of all stripes love these kinds of crises, because that's when religion is most likely to infect people. And we can predict right now, as sure as the sun will rise tomorrow, that a wide range of religious leaders will be saying things like, they were protected by their prayers, or their members will be protected. We're already seeing this right now. We will see efforts at proselytizing. If you just go to our church, you won't get the disease. Or if you die, you'll go to our particular heaven. Those kinds of pleas will come from every religion. Next, we will see fear-mongering and end-of-times apocalyptic predictions. All sorts of things will come from Islam, Christianity, even cults, and even from politicians. It will be from almost every corner of the planet. We know this up front because it has happened in virtually every crisis of this type throughout history. So that's the second piece of information that we could put into our emotional toolbox. In simple terms, it's an attempt at emotional blackmail, and it works for a certain portion of the population. Your friends and relatives may be affected by this. The third piece of information that may be one of the most important is that the protocols we will be asked to follow will go against our very social nature. Social distancing will not be a challenge for some people who are perhaps more accustomed to social distance or highly introverted or, enjoy long periods of time alone. But that is a fraction of the general population. Most of us need, even crave, human contact. And yet, we will be asked to avoid human contact. I think it's important for us to recognize the impact of this behavior and what it will have on us, because it is unnatural for our species to maintain social distance. Our response to this may be a feeling of loneliness, isolation, or helplessness. And this may feed thoughts that increase the likelihood of depression and other responses like anger, and especially fear. For example, you may be isolated in your home with your loved ones for weeks at a time with very little outside interaction. This can be very taxing on our family and on the individuals in your family. It's a good idea to prepare for this and to have a family discussion about how you're going to manage this emotional journey together. We are socially isolated from the outer world, but overwhelmed by too much contact with our loved ones inside our own home. This is a crazy dynamic. We're lonely on the one side and overwhelmed by social contact on the other. Just acknowledging this is a big step in managing these emotions. We'll be asking our partners, our children, our elderly parents, and all sorts of other people in our lives to change, sometimes dramatically change, their interaction patterns with us and with each other. This can't help but create emotional responses. Acknowledging those responses in advance and trying to manage them is a big step in staying mentally healthy in the next 3 to 4 months. Let's begin with some of the simplest things you can do to maintain strength in the next few months. Fortunately, we're coming into spring, my favorite season. After a long winter, it's good to get outside, and that will be one of the most important things you can do for yourself. Get outside and enjoy the sun. Enjoy the budding flowers and trees, and get some exercise. Exercise will be the first line of defense against intrusive thoughts and emotional depression. All of our research around depression shows that exercise is equal to or better than any medication. Sunlight helps us recalibrate our mental and emotional cycles. Now, many people will have unstructured time on their hands. They're used to going to and from work or other things. It is important to restructure your time to take care of yourself. For example, set a time each day to take care of yourself. Take yourself for a walk. Even a short walk is better than sitting at home, ruminating and thinking about finances or ill relatives or a child who's not feeling well. Even if someone in the house is ill, get out and enjoy the sunlight at least once a day. If you're ill, take care of yourself in all the recommended ways. I'm not here to give medical advice, but be aware that your caregivers will need self-care. So encourage them to get outside and to go care for themselves. Let's be honest about something that can be hard to admit. When we get ill, we often revert to forms of behavior that we may not be very proud of. I know when I'm feeling good, when I'm not feeling good or I'm stressed, I get quite snappy with people I love. Others may become much more dependent and needy when they're feeling bad. Openly recognizing these tendencies in ourselves can help others understand us and help to mitigate some of these less desirable behaviors when we're feeling bad or stressed. Be careful not to take things personally. Stress brings out poor behavior in many of us. That's not an excuse, but it is a reason for the behavior. So be quick to apologize when you catch yourself overreaching or being more demanding or dependent on others. In other words, become self-aware. Self-awareness is more difficult when you're under stress, but self-awareness can help mitigate the strain on relationships and help you find new ways to channel your emotional energy so that it does not cause more stress and damage your relationships. During this time, it will be important to maintain social relationships by other means. You can do this the old-fashioned way by just picking up the phone and calling your mother, or scheduling a Skype session with your brother or your child who may be in college. If you have children, this disruption will cause them a good deal of stress. Remember, children tend to pick up on the adult stress and act that stress out. You can help alleviate the stress by creating new schedules and traditions with your children and include them in things like your walks, unless, of course, you need to be alone. Start reading a book to them at the same time every day, or doing some of their school with them at the same time every day. Structure and predictability make life more comfortable for children, and the way for adults, and by the way for adults as well. A chaotic response to this new environment makes adjustment harder for everyone, parents and children alike. I realize this is easier said than done, but it's pretty darn important. Children need structure, and they will respond and create less stress in you if they feel less stressed. It will be easy for everyone to stay indoors, get on each other's nerves, and ruminate and worry and fall into depressive thoughts. As an adult, you can help your children learn new coping skills for dealing with a stressful environment. If you're a person who worries, ruminates, overthinks, or tends to obsess about things, this is a good time to openly acknowledge this and seek out resources and people who can help you stay grounded. It is also a good time to practice meditation, deep breathing, mindfulness, yoga, or other methods of self-regulation that you may have learned from a therapist or instructor. Self-regulation is an important life skill, but it's very important in uncertain environments. Next, stay off the internet and give yourself permission to enjoy a good book. Do some exercise. Watch an old movie. Go for regular walks. Play a game with someone or with your kids. Do this every day. Make a routine of this. Coordinate this with your partner to reinforce the process. If you have children, each parent can take one of the new routines with the children so the other can go out for a walk, or read, or engage in other self-care. Finally, focus your energy on helping someone else. Someone will need a meal, a phone call, financial support. In times like these, you will tend to focus internally and get bound up in your own thoughts and feelings and worries. Focusing outward and helping others is an important way to self-regulate. As you do these things, take just 1 minute each day to take 3 deep breaths. And recognize how good it feels to take care of yourself and those you love. Reflect on the day. Reflect on what is working and what you might want to do differently tomorrow. In other words, practice some mindfulness and intentionality about living each day. It's a great life skill for any time. Imagine 5 years from now. What would you like to say you learned during this time? Would you look back and say, I started an exercise routine that I've maintained ever since the great virus crisis of 2020? Will you look back and say, I picked up a new hobby and I still do it today? What will you say 20 years from now to your grandnieces and nephews or your grandchildren when you tell them stories of how you survived the crisis of 2020? What do you want your children to say 20 years from now when they recall your family and what you did? Maybe you would like others to say, I remember when Jane and Joe put a casserole on our front porch and rang the doorbell so we would have a hot meal to eat when we were sick. Bill gave us $50 when we were down to our last penny. This is called future pacing, and it's a great way to help frame your experience now so you can look back in the future and find meaning and value in how you weathered this storm. So let me summarize some key things to remember in the coming months. First, this is as much an emotional, psychological journey as it is a physical one. Whether you become ill or not, you will be emotionally affected by this event. I am sure we will all do our best to stay safe help prevent the spread of virus, but I want us to thrive and learn. I hate to use the old tripe about making lemonade out of lemons, but that's really what we're doing and what we can do. I'm a mountain climber. I had to go to Colorado every year and climb mountains. One thing every mountain climber knows is that there are false peaks. When you climb a mountain, you look up and you see what appears to be the top. As you get higher and higher, you think, that's a top. Until you get to that top and you find out that was a false peak. Because there's another peak, and then another peak. You may encounter 3, 4, 5 false peaks until you get to the true peak. That is what we're about to experience in the next 3 to 4 months. There will be several false peaks. Some of these false peaks will come from poor information, from unreasonable hopes and expectations. It could also come from intentionally false information. So let's arm ourselves with the notion that we're in for probably 4 months of more or less dealing with this. If it's less than that, that's great. But let's keep our expectations reasonable and based on reality. When it's all over, we'll encounter another set of emotional issues, much like our earlier example of a car accident. Even though the difficult time is apparently finished, we will have been through some form of heightened alert for months and now have to find a new normal for ourselves. That may be the time to pay very close attention to any depressive tendencies. The moral of our story is that this is an emotional journey as well as a physical one, but it is not an ordeal to be endured. We want to live, not just endure. We want to learn to self-manage and self-regulate in a difficult environment. We want to teach our children to self-regulate, and we want to live with these new realities. Thanks for watching. Be safe, and I hope you and your loved ones find hope and support. We are all in this together, and we can only overcome this together.